Welcome to Season 2 of the Erotic Realm podcast, where we explore the world of eroticism, one erotic realm at a time. I'm Em, a sexologist and kinkster. The mission of the Erotic Realm is to humanize desire in all of its forms, including darker desires. Each episode, we dive deep into the psychology of desire with a sexpert, everyday kinkster, or a kink expert. This is an independent podcast. To support it, please consider becoming a paid subscriber at psychologyofdesire.com, where you'll also find deep dives into desire and surveys that you can participate in. You can also sign up there to get the podcast delivered directly to your inbox when it's released. And now for today's episode. The following conversation explores one of the most quietly held tensions in modern sexuality. What happens when masculinity and submission collide? Today, I'm joined by relative cultist, a submissive man, anthropologist, and writer to explore the internal dilemma that many men never speak about, the conflict between who they've been taught to be and what they actually desire. We talk about the psychological pressure to perform masculinity, the shame that many men feel around their submission and sexual expression, and how experiences like ejaculation and performance anxiety can shape identity far beyond the bedroom. This is a conversation about identity, surrender, and what it means to become a man on your own terms, not the ones you were given. Enjoy. Hi everyone, and welcome to the Erotic Realm. Today we are exploring the erotic realm of Jack. Welcome, Jack.
Hi.
Happy to have you here. So first of all, we'd like to hear a bit about your life on a day-to-day level outside of kink. What are you up to when you're not being kinky?
Sure. I am a business owner and I have a bunch of dogs and cats and a kid, and I craft sometimes, mostly BDSM equipment, if I'm being honest.
Oh,
And I play some guitar and I cook a whole bunch, and otherwise just a regular person.
lovely. So let's jump into your eroticism now. How do you identify both in terms of your sexuality and your kink identity?
I am a cishet male, basically. I am a submissive. So I am pretty much plain in a lot of ways, but I am very kinky.
Okay, it's interesting how you say you're plain in a lot of ways. What do you mean by that?
Well, in the sense that I'm cisgendered. I'm your atypical kind of regular guy. You wouldn't know that I'm kinky at all if you
Okay.
passed me in the street.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love when people are undercover and you never know what
Right.
they're up to.
hmm
So when did you first realize that you were submissive, that it wasn't, that you had this kink that wasn't just a regular guy thing?
Honestly, it goes back a long ways if I think about it now, but at the time I really didn't know. Some of my earliest experiences with thinking about submission and dominance and the typical sort of like damsel in distress scenes from the movies, right, that
Mm-hmm.
always were very interesting to me. they I didn't know what those were. I didn't have words for them. But I realized probably in my late teens, if I'm being honest, I was
Mm-hmm.
doing things, playing with myself and experiencing these things from a sensual perspective because I was mostly curious.
Right.
Whereas I didn't have the terminology. I mean, I'm in my mid 40s, so for me it was in the 90s. The internet was new and slow, and so it's not like I went out of my way to find things that might inform my sexuality to make help me make sense of what was going on with me. And so
Mm.
I just didn't have the terminology at all, but I
Mm-hmm.
was doing sensual sort of kinky things to myself, but I didn't know how to put that into where it belonged. Additionally, and a bit of a tangent, but I was also raised in a very traditional sort of, women do women things and men do men things kind of world, right? and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad worked, and it was very, whether they wanted to admit it or not, they had their Catholic upbringing coming into it. And so I never really understood like what that there were even these possibilities out there. And so I had this masculine impression of
Mm.
myself. Like I have to be this kind of person. I have to be the man, and I have to be tough, and I have to be strong. And there's no way that I would ever, take a punch on the chin without throwing a punch back. And I could never submit to somebody. That's
Mm-hmm.
just not acceptable. Now I'm also wired as a kind of obstinate person, but at the end of the day, I had these classic gender norms imprinted on me. And so I rejected a lot of my feelings about submission. I might be 14, 15, literally tying myself to a chair
Mm.
and strapping belts to myself because it feels good to me, but I'm still going, no, no, I'm a tough guy,
Mm-hmm.
And it just it did not compute at all.
Mm. Now you're having these experiences when you were a teenager, and you're saying that you didn't have the terminology for it yet. When did you come
Right.
across the terminology for submissive and realize that's what you were?
Really, when I was 17, 18, and the internet, I moved back to the United States out of a country that was highly censored to, when cable modems were first coming online, and all of a sudden the internet sped up and everybody had access to porn everywhere. And I dove into that world not knowing what I was going into, but I found myself being drawn to much more taboo porn, like the BDSM porn specifically. And that's when I learned about the terminology. I didn't go out and seek out books. I didn't know there was community. I didn't know any of that. It was really through the internet that
Mm-hmm.
I discovered this sort of stuff. And I know that's not uncommon nowadays, especially. For me, though, I found my way into that space looking at porn, and then I began to understand it through the terminology that was being used to describe that.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
But again, I never saw myself as the submissive.
Okay.
I fought that in myself. I kept telling myself, no, 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 no. You want to be the one in charge. You want to do this to girls, right? You want to tie up women
Mm.
and do these things because that's what you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. And did you spend time tying up women and taking the top role?
I didn't.
Right.
That's the thing. I was too scared.
Mm.
One, I moved around a lot, so I didn't have stable relationships with other partners for very long. And I never had the courage.
Mm-hmm.
Because it always felt like I didn't have the right to do that.
Mm.
I always felt uncomfortable, like I'm not supposed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was just going to ask, how old were you when you did explore your submissive side?
I was 19, and it was with a person in my apartment complex who just, I think she was trying to chase me off almost, like daring me to do stuff. And I went along with it, and I thought, well, this is okay, but it didn't last very long.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had this kind of weird moment where I rejected that part of myself, where I said, no, 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 because she called things off very quickly in the relationship and moved on with her life. And I was like 19. And so I was hurt. And I took that hurt and I turned it into rejection, where I said, well, no, I mustn't actually have enjoyed that. That's bullshit.
Ah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then I doubled down on this idea that no, I need to be masculine. I need to be the one in charge. I need to be the one doing the dominating.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
It
Well,
really wasn't until maybe, I would say, like 2 or 3 years after that where I started to really get caught up in this submission as this sort of like classic masculine man
mm.
is one that is just it's extremely conflicted because you're constantly at odds with your feelings of inferiority and the kind of like classic accusations you get when you feel like, I mean, I grew up in that era where, you know, the F word was thrown around and you get called gay just for walking down the hallway, right?
Mm,
And so at the end of the day, masculinity for me was always kind of in the way of
mm,
realizing who I was. And so there was all these stuttering starts
mhm,
where I would see something and I would feel something and I would explore something in my life, but it wouldn't click with me fully because I
mm,
was constantly having to pull myself back
mm,
to reject truth about myself because there was this social expectation
mm,
behind everything where it's saying, oh no, you can't be that. You have to be the tough guy.
mm,
And so for me, it wasn't just this straight road where you end up saying, oh, I discovered this thing, I had an epiphany, and poof, there I am.
mhm,
I'm whole and complete. That's just not how that worked. It took a decade almost for me to come to terms with this is who I am, and this is what I like, and this is how I want my sexual life to be structured, right?
mm, mhm.
And even now I still struggle with it at times. There are things that I'm just, you know, my wife will say, well, what do you think about trying this? And I have to fight back that initial instinct of going, what does that make me if I say yes?
Mm, mhm. So it sounds like it's been quite a process for you and it's still ongoing. When you said there's been lots of stops and starts, I'm curious about what that actually looked like on a practical level for you. Are you saying that you would have an experience and enjoy it, and then this societal idea of masculinity and this perhaps shame around what that meant for you as a man would cause you to retreat and not explore any further, and then it would take some time for you to do that again? What did it look like in a practical sense?
Yeah, actually, that is a lot of what happened.
Mm,
And a lot of those experiences were not with other people necessarily. That's how deeply ingrained this stuff is that for me, it might be like I'm thinking about something and it's turning me on and I'm saying this is really nice. And maybe it's something about me being submissive to someone or
mhm,
doing something quote dirty, right? And then after I experience pleasure from that, I then turn around and start attacking myself and saying, no, it's bad to have thought that.
mm,
It's bad because it's not manly enough or it's not masculine enough or what would other people, other men think of me, right? It's never, you know, women don't factor into that usually, unfortunately.
Ah, okay. That's interesting because I have heard some submissive men speak about how they're worried that, what will women think of them? Will women think that they're a man?
Right.
Mm,
I have heard that and I've spoken with other submissives and my assessment on that is no, you're really not actually. Go further, go deeper, think that you're worried that women will tell other men that you're that way.
ah,
Right? You're
okay.
worried that the social circles of your male friends will find out. But if you could have promises from a woman in your life that she's never going to tell your guy friends, then you'll do it, and you won't
Mm,
think twice about it.
mm,
I mean, maybe that's just me, but that's been my experience in talking with a lot of other submissive men. Is that the deep down, a lot of it has more to do with what other men think of you.
mm,
And
mm.
this happens, you go to a munch, for example, and you look around the room, like if you go to a femdom party and you meet up for a munch, there's a ton of awkwardness between the men, but very little awkwardness between the women.
Okay.
Right? And the
Mhm.
men are sitting around kind of looking at each other, judging each other, thinking, well, what do you get up to? Well, why are you here? Don't judge me. And the women are going, no, let's have fun. Let's have a blast. Right?
Mm,
It's the rare man you find in that space that is fully comfortable with themselves.
mm, mhm. Well, I'd like to get deeper into that with today's research article, which is looking at how the idea of masculinity isn't just personal, but has these cultural elements, like what you're describing.
Hmm.
And it's by sociologist Connell, who talks about hegemonic masculinity, or the idea that masculinity isn't something men are, but something they are pressured to perform, often at great cost.
Yeah.
So he's describing in the article that masculinity is something that men do, not something that they are. Where do you see yourself stepping out of masculinity as performance in your erotic life? What's the difference between the two?
Between performance and existing within that hegemonic structure, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay. I I would say that oh, how do I put this? In terms of like, I think that that structure in which you, I don't know, I'm kind of struggling with that one because I think that like at the end of the day, th- they're right about saying that um, there are really deep consequences to stepping out and performing something that doesn't fit that structure, right? And in my experience, when I'm going out and saying, okay, well, I'm submissive, there's no way that I'm going to walk out onto the street in the town I live in and just start screaming that to the hills, of
Mm-hmm.
course. No one would consent to that anyway. But at the end of the day, if I go to a party and I and my wife says, okay, we're going to do a scene and I'm going to tie you up naked and I'm going to flog you in front of everybody. From my perspective, fairly plain, but for some people, that's extremely intense for them. And they would think, well, how do you get to being able to do that? I've been asked this before. Well, how do you feel comfortable, being naked in front of a bunch of people, for example, or doing scenes? And if, from the performance aspect, you could look at it and say, well, I'm performing this act, so I'm just occupying this different role, and I can kind of disappear into that and ignore the sociological factors that might be nagging and gnawing at me. And maybe that gives me the release I want
Mm.
and helps me deal with the social pressures in some sense where I have a space where I can play around in this. But the broader issue I have is how do you live with yourself day to day if all you're ever doing is doing this as performance, right? If this is performative behavior, then how are you always then just as a man diving back into that hegemonic structure as a kind of retreat, as you said earlier?
Mm.
And I think that that's true generally, actually. I think a lot of people do that. What I wrestle with is how do I create a space where I'm comfortable with who I am, not as a performance?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And so, in a sense, you have to reject that patriarchal, misogynistic structure that undergirds most of our civilization, right? Such that then you're at odds with it and you don't feel comfortable in that space at all. And the
Mm.
thing is, you probably never will.
Mm-hmm.
That's the real challenge, is that when you're going against this social structure that's so deep and huge and ingrained and it exists in your entire reality around you, how do you how do you find comfort with yourself in this hegemonic space,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's the critical question that I think submissive men have to wrestle with. I'm not only submissives, obviously there's lots of other people that have to wrestle with this. Queer people, for example, LGBTQ people, this is a question they deal with all the time. Minorities have to deal with this all the time. But if you are like me, a white guy who's 6'4" and he's cis het and married to a woman, I could I could go my entire life and never have to tell anybody anything about what I get up to.
Mm-hmm.
It could just stay in the bedroom, and it could just hide from reality, and I could be hiding a part of me so that I just conform to that hegemony, that
Mm.
I exist within the system and I don't challenge it in any way, but it's always gonna nag at you.
Mhm.
It's always gonna be there and eat at you. So yeah, we go out, we perform, we do this stuff, we go through the motions, right? But is that substantive enough for you? Does that
Mm.
actually fulfill you in the ways that you're looking for as a submissive? Is this just a thing you do sometimes? There's
Mm.
nothing wrong with that.
Mhm.
That's fine. People pay for sex workers all the time. People meet up for play parties and play dates, and they meet their needs as a kind of compartmentalization. So for me, this idea of performance is almost the problem. The idea that it is a performance,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
And this speaks to something that I've been thinking about a lot, which is this idea of play, right?
Mm.
We call this play, right? Is that a performance or is it reality? I don't know. This is a question that has been lingering with me for a while.
Mm. So is it
I
a
don't know if that answers your
performance?
question or
It
not.
it does, yeah.
Like,
Mhm. It does. I wanna jump into the play stuff in a little bit, but I had a couple more questions about, masculinity and submission for you.
sure.
What has submission given you that traditional masculinity never did?
Honestly, freedom. I
Mm.
mean, not in the sense of like, oh well, I'm free to do whatever I want in the world, but in the sense of freedom from this lingering shame, right? Because for me, my story is one of deep shame. I was not honest with myself, as I said earlier, about whether or not I was submissive at all. Even when I understood what BDSM was and power exchange, and I knew all the words and the terms, I still wasn't being honest about what I wanted and what I needed. And so accepting that part of myself, going from, you know, avoiding playing at all because I was scared of it with partners, to looking at porn where it's, male dom, female sub, and then in my early 20s starting to think, I wonder what it would be like to be her in that moment, right? And then having to wrestle with that and go, okay, well, why do I feel that way? Why do I want that? To then exploring that with a partner and coming to terms with it and saying, actually, this is who I am. That was a somewhat liberatory experience for me,
Mhm.
but it wasn't epiphanal because for me, that shame always was there.
Mm.
That somewhere in the back of my head, it's saying, this is bad, you're wrong, letting your wife peg you is bad because real men wouldn't do that.
Mm. Mhm.
And so for me, what submission does is it helps me come to terms with the things that I want in my life that I know I need in my life, while at the same time, it brings up a lot of shame. It
Mm.
brings up a lot of fears and worries about not conforming. But
Mm.
in that submission, in that moment, I can experience some small liberty from that because
Mhm.
I've accepted and consented to an arrangement where I don't have to think about it anymore.
Mm. Mhm.
Where at least in that moment, I'm not having to wrestle with that question because I've made a decision and I am in that space and that is who I am in that moment.
Mm. Mm.
Speaking of performance, it's kind of like it's kind of like um, improv in a way, or taking on a character
Mhm.
where you're able to inhabit that for a moment at least. It's not real, not entirely, not fully, but you get to kind of live in that moment. And for me, I get to escape a lot of the shame and the fear.
Mm. Well, I'm so glad you've been able to find that escape and be able to reach that place. And it says a lot about your character and pushing through that shame. So thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
Has your definition of masculinity changed through your experiences with submission?
Oh, absolutely. Yes,
Mm. Can you speak
100%.
to that?
Yeah, I think in some ways it's dissolved
Ah.
in a lot of ways. That really I don't care as much about it. It
Mm.
isn't all that important to me anymore. I've come to this sort of realization that like those are obviously social projections, right? And we create them together. But I don't I don't put as much weight and value on those quote unquote normative structures of masculinity and male behavior.
Mm.
That I don't think they're as real or as important, especially for formation of identity. And I know that that's like a lot of debate about, well, men are broken now and masculinity's messed up and yada yada yada. None of that matters to me so much because I look at it in a more fluid way. I don't see gender as being as important because I can feel confident in who I am as a man, but I can also just as well submit to my wife,
Mm-hmm.
but not in this classic religious way, but in like a very sexual way, right? In
Mm.
a very
Mm-hmm.
controlling way. And in a way that it works for both of us, but is more importantly consented to and negotiated by the both of us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so to me, when I say dissolve, it just it's helped me ratchet down the intensity and the feeling that I need to be masculine, that I
Mm.
need to project those social expectations outward into the world and say, well, this is how I define myself. And look at me. I look like everybody else. I talk like everybody else. I'm a man.
Right.
I don't I don't have that anymore.
Mm. Mm-hmm. That sounds like freedom right there. Mm.
Right.
Mm. If there's a man listening that feels ashamed of his submissive desires or afraid that they make him less of a man, what would you want him to know from someone who's lived this path?
Good question. The answer is I know. I know how you feel. And those feelings are real and genuine and they're valid. That's the first thing to acknowledge is that yes, that fear is not made up. And being afraid of who you are is normal when you don't feel like you conform to what everyone else expects. And you don't, as a submissive man, you definitely don't. Because the expectation is that you're supposed to be the dominant one, right? You're supposed to be in charge. Well, what if you don't want that? You feel bad, and that's okay. But you will also feel better as soon as you start to say, you know what, it's okay. It's okay to accept this part of yourself and explore it as long as you're being responsible with it. You know, if you've come to this great realization that I'm a submissive and I want to go out into the world and explore and do all this wonderful stuff, yes, there's a world out there. There are communities, there are people. It's it's worth exploring, but know that you're okay. Like it's not bad or wrong, and you don't need to jump into the deep end. You can take your time, you can ease into it, and just explore yourself for who you are
Mm.
instead of trying to also project the expectations that come from the community because there are those too, right? We think a subman has to be a certain way,
Mm.
right? Everyone talks about the one true way, right? And it's like, well, that's not true either.
Mm-hmm.
You define what you want to be and take your time and try to really think about what is important to you. And when you are feeling shame and you're feeling like you can't be that person because somebody's looking at you or judging you, just remember that it's okay. There are lots of people who accept you for who you are. I'll say that this is such a deeply ingrained problem in men, especially, that one of the things that my wife has habitually started to say is, it's okay, you're not alone.
Mm.
Because you feel alone, especially as a masculine man coming into a world where you just don't understand it, and you're afraid of it for all the reasons we've talked about. And then you're in this space where it's like, okay, maybe I'm the weird one and I'm the only one. That there's no one else that likes what I like, and that makes the shame feel even worse. But you're not alone. There's a lot of people out there. They may not be exactly like you, but that's what makes this cool. Everybody's a little different,
Mm.
but explore it and be comfortable with who you are. Obviously, it's going to be hard to get there, but the only way you're going to get there is by saying, okay, hey, it's okay for me to feel this way. I'm going to explore it at my pace, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to try things, meet people, learn stuff, and get familiar with it so that I can feel like I have a place in the world,
Mm.
or at least these feelings have a place to be, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm. I love that. It's great advice. Thank you. I'm sure there's many submissive men listening that will really appreciate that. So thank you.
Mhm.
You've mentioned that you have a wife a few times now, and she sounds amazing. I especially
It
love
is.
that she tells you that you're not alone. How did you meet her? And was it in a kink environment? Did you know you were both kinky when you met? What's this
Oh yeah,
story?
yeah. We actually met on FetLife
Cool.
about 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. How?
Um, Honestly, I found her and I just DM'd her
Mm-hmm.
very politely, I might add.
Yes, it's
And
important.
it just so happened that we lived about 200 miles apart, and I was looking on regular vanilla sites, and yeah, I had gotten out of a long relationship with another partner, and I kept going on dates and with people that I didn't know if they were kinky, and I kept running into that same old problem of, well, when do I tell them?
Ah.
How do I tell them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized, well, this is probably bad. And I had joined a community in my local area, but it wasn't the vibe wasn't fitting me, and everybody knew everybody and was already in relationships, and so there's this like different kind of space where you go to the bar and you hope to find somebody, and that whatever's at the bar is your choices, right? And that's it. And the same is true of a kink community as well, where if you go to that community looking for a romantic relationship, chances are you're not going to find it right away, because most people are already there with a partner, or they're there to meet their immediate needs, and they're not openly looking for a romantic partner. And so for me, I kept hitting dead ends in my local area. And so I finally just sort of said, well, maybe I could apply what I know from dating sites to FetLife, which is, and it sounds horrible, I know, but I did eventually, and I said, okay, well, I'll look for people in my area and just hit them up and ask them if I'll tell them who I am and be honest and be polite, and then say, okay, well, are you available? Are you interested? And you know, I she responded.
Mm-hmm.
And she was looking for the same things, and our interests aligned, and we went from there. And it's been 10
Mm.
years.
Wonderful. And did it evolve quickly or
Oh
slowly?
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this: we both left very long relationships, and so we were not interested in jumping right in.
Mm-hmm.
So we took 2 months or so where we wanted to get to know each other a little better, see if things clicked. Plus, there was the distance we had to deal with. So I we talked on DM, and then email, and then we started texting, and then we started calling and talking, and eventually I went down and took her out to dinner, And she decided she wanted to see if I was a decent person or not, or could be trustworthy. So she didn't do anything that day. She didn't even kiss me at all. She just like walked me to my car and then she left. And I thought, oh boy, I hope this went okay. But she was seeing if I was going to freak out, right? Because that
Mm.
you never know with some guys. And
Mhm.
I passed the test, thankfully, and but I wasn't in a hurry either. And so then I just started going down every weekend, and we would go out to dinner, and we'd, very youthful energy, making out in the car at the lake. It's a very Midwestern American thing to do.
Cute.
And yeah, it was very cute and very youthful and fun. And eventually she um, came up to my place, and that's when we kind of just said, okay, well, we're going to do this.
Mhm. And it's been 10 years, and it sounds like
And
you've
that's been,
been submissive to her the whole time?
yes.
Mhm. So what surprised you the most about submission in a long-term relationship?
How hard it is.
Mm. What do you mean by
It's,
that?
it, Well, at the end of the day, I had we went to couples therapy a number of years ago, and the therapist told us that BDSM is relationships on hard mode.
Yep.
And I firmly agree because realistically, what matters most is your relationship.
Mhm.
The DS is like you put it on top, it's extra. And
Mm.
so for us, our relationship has always been the priority, and it's not been easy. It's been very difficult. And so that's made the activities of BDSM and submission and dominance power exchange that much harder because we had to solve a lot of communication issues and past trauma and all this other stuff. And that made it very hard for us to consistently engage in a way that was fulfilling to both of us.
Mhm. Mhm. And have you reached a place where you're able to do that more now that you've done the work, or is it still ongoing?
I mean, it's always ongoing,
Mhm.
but I think that compared to where we started, it's night and day different.
Yep.
We've made enormous strides, and
Mm.
a lot of it is down to the effort that my wife has put in. You know, but at the end of the day, it's been really hard. But I'm really proud of what we've done
Mm.
because we've always stayed very true to we're together because we love each other and because we like each other and because we get along and we have similar goals. And one of those goals is a deep and rich BDSM life where she we exchange power and she's the dominant person and I submit to her.
Mhm. Beautiful. I'm glad to hear that the hard work has reaped its rewards. And even though it's hard, it's also rewarding, right? Mhm.
Right, right. Why
Mhm.
it's it's worth it. Put the effort
Mhm.
in.
Mhm. You've coined the term EMFLSR and said that that was out of frustration with existing models. What is this term?
Oh goodness, that was a long time ago.
Okay, is that not present for you anymore? I think I found it
I
on your profile.
Yeah, I remember sending that to you a while
Mhm.
back. I'm trying to remember what the acronym even stood for. What was it? It was something about, what is it about, um, oh goodness, I don't even remember. This always happens to me. I always say something and then I forget that I said it.
That's all right.
Um,
I was assuming it was something to do with female-led relationships, the
yeah,
FL. Mhm.
basically, if I remember correctly, it's something about female-led relationships, but curtailed by some constraint about it basically being in the bedroom,
Mhm. Mhm.
and that in other ways it's essentially in every other way it's egalitarian as much as possible. And so, oh yeah, I remember now. It's egalitarian marriage, female-led sexual relationship. That's the acronym. um, so yeah, I mean that's kind of what I strive for, really, because I remember going down a rabbit hole and talking a lot with people about FLR, female-led relationships, and to me there was always a kind of um, antagonism about like classic 50s style, male dominated households, right? And I've always had this issue where I feel like a lot of the ways in which FLR is painted, it's kind of an inversion of that relationship. And I'm not saying that that's inherently wrong. It's just I feel uncomfortable with that particular framing because
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was good then, and I don't think it's good in the inverse per se.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I can understand where people arrive at it. I get the appeal, right? As a submissive man, a very deeply submissive man, I get the idea. Like, why not play with those sort of, you know, she makes all the decisions and then you just do the chores kind of thing, right? But at the end of the day, I strive for something that is the sexual relationship that I have with my wife is mediated and controlled by her. We have made the choice to where she makes all those decisions. But in our marriage, we're egalitarian as much as possible, where we talk, we negotiate, we discuss, we have our own opinions. It's not that okay, and when we're dealing with the kids' school stuff, that she just barks orders and says do the following thing. It's we sit like normal people and we talk. But when
Right.
it gets into the bedroom, that's when the what I call the light switch flips, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm.
then it's into this new role space where she makes all the decisions.
Sounds fun.
Hmm. Yeah, it is.
Now, as part of our conversation today, I asked you to bring along something to share, such as a quote, book, or movie that's influenced your erotic realm. What have you brought along today?
Well, I have brought along a well, first off, I this might be controversial, but
Cool.
I want to give a shout out to the thing that really helped me when I was very new to this, when I was trying to learn about myself. And that's a website probably everybody knows is kink.com. I know it's porn and it's malign, but for me, in the moment when I was looking for something on the new high-speed internet, that site showed up in like what 2000, 2001 or something around there, and I found it. And instead of it just being 3-minute throwaway, they were long form structures where they had an interview at the end and they talked about what they did and they talked about that everybody's consenting and that they like this and they like that. And for me, that meant a huge amount to me. And I know it's a porn site, but like in that pivotal moment in my life, it helped me make sense of what I was dealing with because I didn't go out and read books on it. And I had no one in my orbit who ever would talk about this kind of stuff.
Mm, hmm. So was it because you were seeing them talk about what had happened at the end and owning it? It helped you kind of release
Yeah.
some of that shame?
Yeah, totally.
Mm,
And
hmm.
help me think it through and say, well, this isn't just for porn, right? I mean, obviously it was, but they at least pretended or made it seem like, hey, they're interested in this, and they're
Yeah.
talking about things they do and don't like, and that it started to leave. It helped it leave the space of this is fantasy and it's not real to maybe it's something that I could do.
Mm, hmm. Hmm. Now, you've said that desire doesn't stabilize, it keeps unfolding. What is
Mhm.
unfolding for you at the moment?
Right now, my wife and I are working on integrating more consistency and ritual into our relationship.
Hmm.
So we're trying to do more on the sort of touching base every day as much as possible about just little things, um, reaffirming our commitment to our roles in our power exchange.
Hmm. I love that. Sounds beautiful. So, is that creating more intentional spaces before you play in terms of ritual, or is the touching it communicating every day part of the ritual itself?
We are, it's both of those things.
Mm-hmm.
We've been working on developing methods to initiate play in a more clear way, establishing clear entry and exit in and out of roles. Just as a fun aside, we can't figure out what word to use to stop play, and we've been debating it for a couple
Ah.
of months, going, "What would be a good word for we're done?" And nothing sounds quite right. But we've been working on a daily ritual actually, where it was something I proposed to her, and she thankfully was saw what I was getting at, which is that she essentially we go into private, and then she has me essentially reaffirm that I belong to her, and then I bow, and then I kiss her feet, and she asks me questions, and then it's over and we're done, and then we say we love each other and we kiss, and that's our little daily ritual. And so far we've been pretty successful at doing it every day, which is great. So that it's sort of those little rituals that we've been trying to incorporate more into our
Beautiful.
daily life.
Mm. Beautiful. Now, earlier you mentioned that you've been writing about power exchange and play. So
Yes.
let's get into it. Can you share
All
more
right.
about that?
Sure. I have been deeply curious about the very word play, right? And I mentioned this before. I know that we call it play in BDSM. It's almost instinctive. We keep calling it play. And I was asking myself, well, where does this idea come from? Is it actually play? Is this something that we are doing consciously, that we're making a decision to shift into roles? And if so, and I think we are, why? Why are we doing that? And so I started reading a book. It's by I think he's Australian. He is it's called Goliath's Curse by Luke Kemp. It's about dominance hierarchies, and it got me thinking about how perhaps we play with BDSM as a way to reconfigure and deal with the kinds of dominance hierarchy in which we live in every single day and cannot consent to, right? There's a lot packed in that statement, I know, but at the end of the day, I started to think, well, are we doing this because are we engaging in BDSM and power exchange and all these sort of dominant structures, right, with our partners because that's natural or normal, or are we doing this because it's a reaction to something?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's a response, right, for dealing with the things that we can't control. So I started reading a philosopher. I had read his book a couple of years ago. His name is C. Tien Nguyen, and he writes about the philosophy of games and play. And he described games as an opportunity to temporarily manipulate basic features of our own agency. And that um, essentially the practical activities of non game life occur within the relatively inflexible constraints of what he calls enduring values, right? Such that our normal life is deeply constrained. It's not flexible. And so we engage in games and play as a way of kind of backing out of that. And he goes on to say, in games, we can change our in game values. We can take on these temporary agencies, temporary sets of abilities and constraints, along with pursuing temporary ends. And so I thought, well, doesn't that apply to what we're doing in BDSM? Are we not then also just playing a game? And so, and this is really new on my thinking. I started to say, well, I've heard it described that the f- a relationship is like the foundation of a house.
Hmm.
And I used to think that BDSM was like a wall in that house. You have to have a really good foundation of a relationship to work well for BDSM to function in a relationship, unless it's just pickup play or something, right? Where you're just very clear about that moment. But I'm starting to see that the foundation is not it the relate or rather the relationship is not just the foundation. It's the walls, it's the roof, it's the whole environment. And to me, BDSM is like a game of Dungeons and Dragons you play in the house, right? It's a game that you play because the environment is safe and fun and interesting, and it's a good environment where you can play. And for a long time, I tried to tell myself, no, 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 we want to drive as close to reality as we can, right? With this BDSM stuff, because it's that fundamental to who we are. And now I'm seeing it very differently, where I'm thinking the reason we play is because if it were real, it wouldn't be consensual.
Mm. Hmm.
Our lives are structured by dominance hierarchies that are not consensual. And so we like to go out and to quote Team UN, he says, when games work, they can sometimes present us with the world as we wish it would have been,
Hmm.
where even our worst impulses are transformed into pleasure for others,
Mm.
which I find fascinating because he's essentially saying we play games to almost escape and reimagine the world because the
Mm.
world we live in is constrained.
Hmm.
And the world we live in, we don't consent to in a lot of ways. And so for us as BDSM practitioners, it's almost like an impulsive drive to seek out and reorganize and refigure this relationship of power that we live with in our daily life and take some control over it
Mm. So,
and then play with that.
mm. Does that mean if we happened to live in paradise, however that looks, whatever you imagine, that we wouldn't participate in kink?
That's the fundamental question I wanted an answer to was
Mm.
would egalitarian societies engage in power exchange on a sexual level?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm.
as a person who, I'm a trained anthropologist, and I went deep diving through the academic literature, and I couldn't find good examples of anything that could answer this question.
What's your
Of
intuition?
my intuition is no.
That we
My
wouldn't?
intuition is that probably not, and even if we did, we wouldn't name it. I'm remembering a piece that I found on, and it was by Malinowski on the Trobriand Islanders. Basically a lady went back and redid his research in the 90s, and she said that the Trobriand Islanders are very sexually liberated, and they don't have many words for sex. They like have 5 or 6 words, but they do all kinds of stuff, but they just don't care to talk about it. So I don't, I mean, we're a very liturgical society, right? You got to explain everything in writing. But like, I am not so sure, but I don't have a good answer to it. I don't know because I don't think anybody's really spent a lot of time looking at this, which is where does this desire to exchange power sexually with our partners come from? Why do you want to dominate your partner? Why do you want to submit? What is this a right? It's I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is what I've been working on. And
Mm.
I don't have a clear answer, but I think I understand it from the perspective of if we define it as play, which we tend to do, then it makes sense because it exists as a relief valve
Mm.
for things in our society that we simply don't get a choice over.
Mm.
Of course, that
Mm.
demystifies it a little.
Ugh,
Like
doesn't
I
take
guess
away
maybe
from the fun.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely doesn't take away from the fun, but I've always had this sort of like mystic view of it, where I've always thought like it's so impressive and cool, right? I don't know, maybe this is a very teenage kind of way of thinking about it, but yeah.
So there's no research out there on more egalitarian tribal communities and their sexual preferences?
There are, but I
Mm.
don't think anyone has that I know of, or that I was able to find, that speak directly to the question of power exchange
Yeah. Oh, that's
in those
fascinating.
relationships. It tends to come from, well, what are the gender norms,
Of
and what
course.
are
Yeah.
the religious views about it? What are the mating practices and child
Mhm.
rearing and all that sort of stuff?
Mhm.
Very classic European sociology stuff.
Mhm.
And I've not found yet, at least, and I hope maybe one day I will, that somebody has asked the question, well, in a hunter forager community that's more egalitarian, do they hold each other down when they're having sex? Do they, spank each other? Do they like,
Mhm.
I don't know. Are those
Mm.
questions you even could ask? I don't know
Mm.
that either.
Mhm. Well, in movies and TV shows, we seem to suggest that they do those things a lot, don't we? But maybe that's our own projection.
It might be, and
Mhm.
I don't know, because
Mm.
I don't way diatribe, but the ideas of primitivism are not real. They're
Mm.
they're just bigotry from
Yeah.
civilization, right? And
Mhm.
so, for me, it's an open-ended question, and so I've been kind of exploring. Well, let's take the egalitarian versus dominance hierarchy question off the table and say, well, we live in a dominance hierarchy. So why do we do this?
Mhm.
And for me, the answer, it lives in this space where it becomes a game, and it becomes a way of playing that allows us to kind of, like I said, reconfigure a relationship that we otherwise don't have a choice in. And then we
Mm.
get to play with it on our terms.
Mm. Okay, fascinating. Please keep in touch about this and what you're writing about. I'd like to,
Sure.
yeah, see where you go with it. And if you've got any writings about it, please do send it my way.
Happily,
Mhm.
happily, I will.
Mhm.
I hope that made sense. I don't know if it does yet.
No,
It
it
barely makes
did.
any
Yeah.
sense to me yet,
Mhm. Mhm.
but
No, yeah, you're obviously exploring an interesting idea that hasn't been explored much, and yeah, I understand completely where you're going with it, and I think it is worthy of looking into more. So yeah, I look forward to hearing where you go with that. Hmm.
Mhm,
Okay, if we can turn back to your own eroticism now,
sure.
I would love to hear from you about a peak erotic experience that you've had.
Sure, I have 2 of them,
Please.
and they fit together neatly. One is from the very beginning of my relationship with my wife, and the other one is fairly recent. And so the first one is really about setting expectations about a relationship, and a way, how she and I decided we're going to move forward into our sexual relationship on our own terms. And so I had said earlier that we, met on FetLife, and we did some classic teenage dating kind of stuff, and then finally she came up to my house. But what I didn't tell you is that there were explicit expectations about what was going to happen when she arrived at my house. And we had talked about it, we had negotiated, and she set some expectations. What she wanted was for me to be waiting for her, naked, on all fours. And I had sent her pictures of all of my equipment, and I have a lot of it because I like that stuff. And she selected a butt plug, a cock ring, and a gag, if I remember correctly, and basically said, shave all the parts that matter and wait for me. I'm going to be there at this time. And I did exactly what she said. I did not have my phone with me. um, because had that moment where I'm thinking, well, if I have my phone with me, I don't want her walking in the house and then I'm on my phone. Like, that'd be bad. And so I waited for an hour, drooling all over the floor on a hardwood floor, on my knees, just waiting. She was late, but I was too nervous about breaking the rules to like check my phone or even get up. I just waited. And then finally she came in, walked right past me, and went straight to the bathroom in a house she'd never been to. Just bulldozed right in, straight past. And she went into the bathroom. She did some things and then came back and proceeded to peg me on my floor in my house. And so as we say, and we joke about this, our first time having sex together, she fucked me. And as we say, that's the way it should be. And so that's how we started our relationship. So as we started with the foot on the gas pedal in a sense when it comes to BDSM, but that's what we were wanting. And so the second peak experience came a couple of years ago. Actually, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. My wife had wanted to. She wanted to play around with water sports, and that's pee play, right? And so early on, she's like, "Hey, can I like pee on your leg or whatever?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, whatever. Get in the shower, no big deal, doesn't matter." And but in the course of us experimenting with just a little here and there in the shower, she said, well, can I pee on your head? And at the time, I was like, I don't know, that makes me feel a little uncomfortable, like kind of dirty. And then she said something to me. She says, "Would you drink it?" And I'm like, "Hell no, I wouldn't do that. It's hard limit. No, 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 fuck that." And she goes, "One day you're going to beg for it." And I'm like, "Yeah, right." As if. When she waited 5 years. That's how patient she is.
Wow.
And she started talking about it again, little by little. And she goes, "Hey, can I pee on you in the shower?" And we did it because it's no big deal, right? But it was uncomfortable. The shower was cold and it wasn't pleasant. And then we're having sex and she says, "One day you're gonna drink it." While we're having sex. And I'm going, "What are you doing?" No, 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 no. Suffice to say, that was just enough to plant a seed. And I started asking a bad question in my head, which was, what would it take for me to be able to do that for her? And as soon as that happened, things started to shift in the mind. This is an example of how the brain can change,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
And that relationships change. So we it started to happen. I tested it, it got me close, and you put it to the masturbation test. If you can jerk off to it, it makes you happy, then try it. And at the end of the day, I was getting closer and closer and thinking about, well, maybe I could. Now, for me, I'm wired to where like a lot of my submission is about proving my commitment and demonstrating my love for my partner. And so she leveraged that pretty effectively to get me to go along with it. And we did it. So the peak experience came, we had tried it, watered it down. My thing was I needed to be restrained. Like, you have to
Mm.
force me to do this.
Mhm.
And she did. So I was strapped down to the front of the bed, hands out on each side of the headboard, sitting on a gym mat with a urinal gag in my mouth that she had shoved in my mouth and like strapped to my head. This is a urinal that holds like a cup of fluid and has a tube goes in the mouth. You don't have choices. You have two choices. You drink or you spill it everywhere. And I remember in that moment I was freaked out. I was 100% panicking because I was uncertain I could achieve it. And she had made it very clear. She said, "You will not spill a drop. Not at all.
Mm.
Like, you don't want it on you. I don't want you to waste it either." Right. And so I was sitting there and she started to get in front of me. She's wearing yellow high heels and everything. And then she stepped on the gym pad and almost fell over because apparently you shouldn't step on a gym mat with high heels. And I remember she was so nervous too. Like, she was like shaking and having performance anxiety. And then finally she straddled the gag, and I was looking right down into this thing, and I'm thinking, "Oh fuck, what did I get myself into? Like, this is gonna happen." And then literally she parrots that exactly back to me. She grabs my head and she says, "This is gonna happen." And I'm like, "Okay." And I had my tongue on the hole on the thing, and I was sitting there going, I have to do something. I can't I can't just not do. I'm gonna spill." And then as soon as she started peeing into it, I had the decision to make. And in that moment, it wasn't the first swallow that was the most submissive moment. It was the second. I remember feeling like I was melting.
Mm.
Like, my entire submissive brain just clicked into this space that I had never really experienced before, where I'm doing this thing for this person. She really, really, really wanted it and stuck to it for years, carefully planning and asking for it and working on it, changing me. And then here I was doing it. And I didn't want to fail. I didn't want to mess up. And I had to swallow. And I did. And I completely gave in to submission at that moment. And it was overwhelming.
Mm. Mhm.
And now I'm one of those guys.
It's amazing what you end up being into when you explore different things, you know? They say
Right.
never say never.
Right. I mean, it was a hard limit of mine when we got together, and I was saying,
Mm.
absolutely not. There's no way. And then over time, you explore, you get comfortable, you learn to trust someone. You also
Yes.
want to meet them where they are.
Mm. Mhm.
And she's saying, "This is important to me, and I want this." And I'm saying, "Well, what can I do to give you what you need?"
Mhm. Beautiful. Is
I don't know if
there
you were prepared for that.
No, of course. We've heard all sorts of things on this podcast. You know that. You've listened to the
Yeah,
episodes. Yeah.
true,
Yeah.
true.
Well, is there anything else that you would like to share? Maybe a topic we haven't spoken about yet, or just something from your experience that you feel to share with the listeners?
Yeah, I would say it's something that I've been thinking about in listening to your podcast is that th- there is a very big difference between that early period when you're first coming into BDSM and you're really excited. You've discovered this whole new world and you found a path to satisfying that, right? And maybe you're going into the community or you're meeting people online. That excitement is amazing. There is a reality here that is not BDSM. You're not going to find a relationship that is BDSM. That's just the cold hard facts.
Mhm.
Is it relationship comes first. That having a solid relationship with your, well, let me caveat that by saying if you're looking for a romantic relationship,
Yeah.
right, then that should be your focus, is finding a partner you can live with, finding a partner you agree with. Like, I personally, as an atheist, would have a hard time being with a deeply devoutly religious person just because they're a dom, for example.
Mhm.
It would be very difficult for me, and probably vice versa, right? And so those sorts of things matter more than the BDSM. The BDSM is important, but it's just one part of the whole picture. And so it's easy to get caught up thinking, I'll find a BDSM relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But I've got news for you. There's no such thing.
Yep.
At least that's what I think.
Mm. Well, that's great advice. Thank you again. Okay, so when it comes to your eroticism, thinking about your journey with submission, your time with your wife, everything you've been through, and where you are today, if you had to describe your erotic self in one word, what would that word be and why?
Sensual.
Mm.
I consider myself a sensualist,
Mhm.
first and foremost, because it's always been about feeling different things. Whether I was experimenting with pool toys, I snuck at night and when I was 13 or 14, and strapping them to my body and feeling how different it felt, or textures, or wanting to be in different situations. It's always been about the sensual feeling, like, how does it feel different? How can it feel in different ways? I used
Mm.
to be a professional chef at one point, and that really became very clear to me when I was cooking all the time at a high level. Was I really obsess about the way things are different and how they feel, how they taste, the textures, and for me, that's always been central to my sexuality, is exploring different sensations.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Well,
So
Jack, thank
BDSM is a big sensation.
it
Sorry.
is. It's all about sensation. Yep. Mm-hmm. It's a good place to be
Mm.
if you're a sensation slut.
Right, right.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jack, thank you for this conversation. You've shown that submission, masculinity, and responsibility don't cancel each other out, but that they mature together. And it's been a privilege to explore your erotic realm.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you again. I'm Em, and this has been the Erotic Realm podcast.
Thank you for listening to The Erotic Realm. If this episode stirred something in you, please take a moment to follow the show, leave a rating, or write a review on wherever you're listening. It helps more people find the show and brings visibility to this deeper conversation about eroticism and self-understanding. I'd also like to invite you to dive deeper into the psychology of desire, including my writing, research, and upcoming courses over at psychologyofdesire.com. This is where I release the Psychology of Desire case files, behind-the-scenes thoughts, and intimate reflections every week, plus more. Until next time, stay curious, stay embodied, and keep exploring. Also, as always, stay perverted.